Assalam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Sufism is a journey from lower consciousness to higher consciousness, to wisdom, and to transcendent wisdom. A journey through Shariat, Tariqat, Hakikat, and Marifat. A journey through many stages. A journey of constant rebirth, constant recognizing again and again and again that we are entering into a new space, a new open space, a space that we could not conceive of before we got there. Like this, we need to understand that we have to be open to change. When a teacher teaches in a classroom where all the grades are assembled, as in a small town, he obviously has to teach different things to different children because different knowledge is understood at different levels. Well, it's like that with the sheikh. The sheikh gives to everyone what they are capable of understanding, what they are capable of taking away, and what they are capable of imbibing. Allah also treats us with compassion and with mercy. So he doesn't give us more than each of us can handle. He doesn't give us more than we can take. If he did, we would become overwhelmed and we would lose our ability to move forward. We would become either frightened or overwhelmed or in such a state that progress wouldn't be possible. So he gives us the amount that we can handle. And since each of us is different and each of us has different backgrounds and different ideas and different ways of seeing things, we each get different lessons. But there is one major lesson, and that lesson is that we have to move forward and that there is no resting in any place that we've gotten to. This is an ongoing path that doesn't have an end, for Allah is the culmination of this path. And if we haven't disappeared yet, we haven't reached that end. There are lots of stories that talk about this disappearing. In America, there was a man whose name was Johnny Appleseed, and he went around and planted apple seeds throughout the country to grow apple trees. And there's a story about when he was a child, he asked his mother, when he saw an apple on their kitchen table, where did the apple come from? And she said, from an apple tree. And where did the apple tree come from? From an apple seed. And where did the apple seed come from? From an apple. And how did the apple seed come into a place where it could grow into an apple tree? He said, well, the apple had to die. It had to be eaten by something, or it had to decay. And then the apple seed was let loose, and the seed implanted itself in the ground. And then an apple tree grew. And then he said, "Mommy, does everything have to die?" And she said, "Well, if it wants to live, it has to die." And this is a very, very interesting concept, that through death comes life. Through leaving one thing behind, we come to another place. But are we cognizant of that? Are we open to that? Or are we afraid of that? There was an old lady who lived in a stone house on a river, and she was a very kind woman, had many years on her, and she was liked by all the people, but in her heart, she knew something was missing in her life. She knew there was something else. And one day, while she was standing at the river in front of her house, looking out, she realized she had to cross this river in order for her life to truly begin. But she couldn't figure out how to get across. The river was a little too wide, and the water was a little too fast and a little too deep. And she was afraid if she stepped into it, there would be a disaster. So she just stood there at the edge of the river. And then out of nowhere, a man came along and put a big stone in front of her. And she stepped on the stone and again was thinking about how is she going to cross the river. She went back to her house that night, went to sleep. The next morning, she went out and stood on the stone in the river, and this man came along again and put another stone in front of her. And she took the next step, and she stood there for a while. And then that evening, she went back to her house. And the next morning, she came back and stood on that stone, and the man came again, put another stone, and then another stone. The next morning, she was there waiting, and she was now used to this man coming and putting stones in front of her. But nothing was happening. He seemed to be late. Something was wrong. She turned around to look to see what was going on, and she saw the man taking the stones from her house and using them so that she could cross the river. And that's when she realized she was going to have to give up her past life in order to take on her new life. To be able to move in the world in this direction, and to be able to move into the unknown, is difficult and creates fear in people. To be able to move forward without fear takes a strong belief in your Creator, a strong belief in the fact that you are being guided appropriately. When I was young, I was involved in a situation at work where the people that I was working with were not kind. And it made the work environment difficult. I was married, I had a child, and I was making money. And of course, I needed money in order to support the family. But I didn't want to stay where I was. I didn't want to stay employed in the same place where I was. Well, fortunately, at that time, I already had a sheikh. I had met Bawa Muhaiyaddeen a few years before, and I wrote to him And I told him about the situation. And I said that I was uncomfortable where I was. What did he suggest? I also told him that some of the people that I were working for they were actually cruel. And he said, he wrote me back. I was a lawyer, and he said, start your own practice. Allah will take care of you. He said, it is better to live in your own rat hole than in somebody else's castle. And this gave me the courage to move forward. But it also gave me an understanding of our existence in this world. As long as we are dependent on others, as long as we can't release our dependency on certain institutions or certain things that help take care of us, our freedom to find God is going to be limited. We have to be free to move forward at any second. So it's better to live in your own rat hole than in somebody else's castle. The less we are dependent on others, the freer we are to move forward in this path of transcendence. Too much dependence hinders transcendence. Too much relying on others hinders transcendence. In order to become free, we have to be able to rely on Allah alone. Now, I was fortunate enough that I had a manifest being who I had learned to rely on, who told me this and explained it to me and said, in the world, rely on God and he will take care of you. So I had the courage to move forward. We all need to find that courage. We have to find that courage to move forward, to move away from that which holds us in place and doesn't allow us to move forward. To enter into the path of truth, you have to give up everything that isn't true. And you have to begin to be able to realize that which isn't true. You have to have the foresight and the insight to see that which isn't true. I was with Bawa in Sri Lanka, and a woman was there who had just received a letter from the man she was married to at the time. And the man says to her in the letter, I've just met a sheikh in Syria. I've taken a hand with him, and I want you to come to Syria and be with me. Now, taking hand is a phrase used in Sufism to mean that you've given allegiance to a sheikh. And she said, what should I do, Bawa? He's taken hand with this sheikh. What am I supposed to do? And Bawa looked at her and laughed. And he said, your husband has found a handshake. I'm a heart sheikh. You should stay with the heart sheikh. And this is an incredibly important point, because institutionalized religion will give you a certain amount of understanding, but it's limited because it doesn't touch the heart. It doesn't open the heart. We have to get to the place where the heart is opened. We have to get to the place where truth resides as opposed to form. Form becomes more important in many places than truth. Rabia, the great female Sufi saint, said, "I am not interested in any reward for my ritual observances. I'm looking to know Allah." And this is an important understanding that each of us has to get. We are not here to merely do ritual observances. If that were so, then the path would end at Shariat. It wouldn't go to Tariqat, Hakikat, and Marifat. It would have stopped at ritual observance. But there are states beyond ritual observance, and we have to understand that those states exist, and we have to set an intention within ourselves to get to know those states beyond ritual observance. We have to get to a place where we communicate directly with our Lord, not through some formula that we've been given, but directly from our sincerest, deepest inner heart, from our sincerest, deepest inner understanding of things, to the place where our truth resides. We have to be able to melt our truth into His truth. We have to come to know ourselves to know Him, but to know ourselves in reality, not to know ourselves through ritual, not through know ourselves through just practice. This doesn't mean that practice shouldn't be involved, but it means that we have to understand that there is a place beyond practice. We have to understand that there is a deeper understanding than practice alone. There's a story about a devil who was walking, Satan was walking with a friend of his, and they saw a man, and they were just following behind him, and he stopped and picked something up, and the devil's friend said to him, "What is it that he found?" He said, "He found a piece of the truth." He said, "Well, are you going to take it away from him?" He said, "No, he'll make a whole religion out of it. He'll take one little tiny instance of learning, one little tiny instance of knowledge, and he'll make an entire religion out of it. He'll find his own way to go wrong. I don't have to help him." It's like that. We have to be able to go towards the essence of things, and we can't be satisfied with the surface of things. There's a Turkish poet whose name is Yunus Emre. And Yunus is the name of a prophet, but Yunus in Turkish also means dolphin. And a dolphin is an air-breathing creature, even though it's in the ocean. And a dolphin can dive very, very, very deep and then come back up for air. We need to learn how to become like a dolphin, like a Yunus. We have to learn how to dive very, very deep. We have to dive into the depths of our own heart. We have to dive into the depths of our own understanding. We have to dive into the depths of our own intentions. We have to scrutinize as deep as we can every single thing that we do to find out the reasoning why. What is at the essence of our intention? What is it that we are trying to accomplish? What is it that we want to do? What is it that we're looking to find out about. In meditating, these are the questions that we should ask ourselves. And what is real meditation? It is the going inward to find out what our faults are and ridding ourselves of those faults, purifying our being, because without that purification, there can be no advancement. Without that purification, there can be no moving forward. What's the use of meditating if you're behind a million veils? Until these veils are lifted, recognition of reality can't happen. So we can conjure all the thoughts we want, but as long as we're blocked by these veils of impurities within our being, we can't move forward. So what is the step that we need to take? The step is to find out about ourselves and our impurities and begin to release these impurities from us. And how do we do that? One way is to forgive every animosity that we hold against anybody in this world. One by one, forgive each animosity. Then when we've forgiven everyone out there, we can begin to ask Allah for forgiveness of the mistakes that we've made. Because of the reciprocal nature of the world, because of the way that karma works, which is what you do unto others comes back unto you, do you expect to be forgiven if you haven't yourself forgiven? Each of us are in a place where we need to be forgiven. Each of us, if we look into our own past experience, if we look into our life and what's occurred, we see the mistakes that we've made. We've been given a directive not to harm any being, but there's no question that times have occurred where we have in fact harmed beings. Now, it may not even have been conscious that we did it, but harm occurred, and we need to be forgiven for that harm. Well, we will be forgiven if we forgive everybody who's harmed us. If we become clean and pure of interaction with harm, then we can move on to be forgiven. So we forgive as we are forgiven. We understand things as we progress towards purity. Things become available to us that can be seen, that can't be seen when we are not in a pure state. Things change. Sometimes we're not even aware of our intentions. We're not even aware of what it is we're thinking. There was a prince who was riding through a small town, and he ran across near a peasant, and he'd been on the road for a long time, and he began to talk to him, and he saw in the man's eyes that he was really enamored by his horse. And this was a Christian village. And the prince said to the man, "You really like my horse, don't you?" And the man said, "Yes, it would be a great dream of somebody like me to be able to have a horse like that." And the prince said to him, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you can recite the Lord's Prayer, I will, without any interruption, I will give you the horse." And the man said, well, of course I know the Lord's Prayer. And he began to recite the Lord's Prayer. And in the middle of the prayer, when he got to, and lead us not into temptation, he said to the prince, and do I get the saddle too? And the prince took off because he didn't meet the requirements. But how well do we know ourselves? How well do we know our intentions? How well do we know what it is that we reach out for and are constantly grasping for? And what are we doing to alleviate that need to grasp? Do we understand that Allah has provided for us all that we need, and that we can, at the station that we are at, be grateful? Or are we waiting until some other events occur before we become grateful? Gratitude is one of the doors to reality. And if we can walk through the door of gratitude, we can enter into states of reality that are unavailable to us until we enter into being grateful. But to be grateful, you have to be in the moment, and you have to be content with the moment. You have to be in the moment, and you have to be satisfied with the moment. And we have to come to the place where we are in the moment and satisfied with the moment at every moment. Because every time we become dissatisfied, we slip into being not content. And we slip into not understanding that we have already been given everything we need in order to culminate our relationship with our Creator and to meet Him. But as long as we create things through desire that we believe we need, we separate ourselves from our Creator. Desire is the big abyss between ourselves and the truth. And until desire is eliminated, that abyss remains. That chasm between ourselves and reality remains. Desire is attached to the illusory world. Desire is attached to that which isn't real. And as long as our contemplation and our consciousness is focused on that which is an illusion, that which is illusory, that which isn't real, we can't be focused on reality. One of the names of Allah in Arabic is Haq. Haq means reality. Haq is the opposite of illusion. If we are trapped in our attachment to illusion, we cannot break into reality. There are so many things that we have to take care of before we are ready. Sometimes they can seem overwhelming because of their enormity in size and in difficulty. But in truth, it can all be severed in an instant. When Alexander the Great was challenged by this knot that said whoever could untie this, they could rule the world, and nobody had been able to untie it, he took his sword out and just cut through it, untied it, and it was done. We need to bring out the sword of Islam and use it on ourselves to detach ourselves from illusion, to detach ourselves from that knot that ties us to illusion. But instead, the world, it has such a great hypnotism on many of us that we spend all our time trying to fix the world instead of trying to fix ourselves. The world is the way that it is. We're not going to find utopias in the world. We're not going to make the world into a utopia. Marxism will tell you that it can be done, but one of the first tenets of Marxism is to do away with Allah, is to do away with God, is to stop the belief in a supreme being. It is now changed into a belief that man, through changing himself, can become that ultimate being. Well, it doesn't work like that. You can find truth in this life. You can find reality in this life, but you can't find it for everybody until they go through the process of detaching themselves from the world. And all of the utopian ideals that you'll see are about attaching yourself to the world and making the world a better place, making the world more economically fair towards everyone. Allah gives as he wishes to give, and it is for us to be able to take what he gives and to be grateful in that moment. There were a group of boys who were working on a farm picking hazelnuts. And at the end of the day, the farmer gave them a large bag of hazelnuts as their reward for their pay for working all day. And the boys said to each other, well, how should we divide it? Should we divide it according to man's law, or should we divide it according to God's law? And they all said, well, let's go to the Hoja and let Hoja divide it for us according to God's law. So they went to the Hoja, and he said, you've asked me to divide it according to God's law. I will. And he took the bag of nuts and he poured them all out, and then he cut it in half. And there were 5 boys. He gave half of it to one boy. Then he cut it in half again and gave that quarter to another boy. Then he cut it in half again and gave that to the 2 other boys, and then one boy was left with nothing. He said, God gives as he determines. It's our responsibility to be able to take what we are given and be satisfied and or do what's appropriate. Now, the boy who got half, if he truly understood this, would understand that now it was his obligation to give some of what he had to those who had nothing. This is charity. Allah gives men the opportunity to do his work. But can man, in fact, do God's work? Or are they so attached to the world that wealth is just for them and not to be shared? There are so many different situations to look at, so many different situations that we can be involved in. In each of them, there is an appropriate way to act and an inappropriate way to act. If we act with the qualities that are Allah's, we will find success in this life. And in this life, we are in a school. And what is the purpose of this school? The purpose of this school is to come to know our Creator. So each of us has to do what it takes to come to know our Creator. And the way to know our Creator is through knowing our Creator's qualities. So we need to understand gratitude. We need to understand compassion. We need to understand mercy. We need to understand kindness. We need to understand love. And if we can't understand these to the point where they act out in our being, where we actually act with these qualities, all we've done is learn definitions. And we can look up the definitions of any of these words. We can look them up in the dictionary. We can look them up in the Asmaul Husna. But the point is, we have to become these qualities. Rahman is a name of God. Rahman and Rahim mean mercy and compassion. If you can be mercy and compassion, you have become God-like. If you become God-like and you share in God's qualities, then you begin to know a little bit of what it's like to be the one who maintains and sustains and provides. We get in line with Allah. This is what surrendering is. Giving up that which are our own ideas from the world and replacing them with God's qualities. Surrendering worldly qualities for God's qualities. Surrendering worldly ideas for God's qualities. Surrendering worldly intentions for godly intentions, for transcendent intentions, for the higher intentions, for the intentions of bringing peace to humanity, for the intentions of bringing peace to everyone that we come in contact with, for spreading the resonance of truth throughout the world. And there are men in the world whose resonance of godly qualities is so powerful that they're able to keep entire communities together in a peaceful, grateful place because of their presence. We need to become one of those people who've taken on Allah's qualities and have it resonate within our being so that we can at least help the ones close to us. And it begins with our family. And then it spreads out beyond our family. And then we become the ones who are God's helpers within this world. And God helps the ones who helps him. God befriends the ones who befriend him. God does for those who do for him. So if we want to set up a relationship with Allah, then let's begin to do Allah's work in this world. Let's bring mercy and compassion and love and kindness into this world. Let's give up that old life that we lived and enter into a new life. Let's be reborn into the qualities of God. Let's be reborn into the majesty of our Creator. Let's be reborn into the transcendent nature of the truth. And let's pray that this happens to us and happens to everyone that we know, that we all come together, understanding reality, and knowing our Lord. May he take us into the circle of the ones he considers his friends. Ameen, ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.